Hey y'all. Today, Blizzard released the patch notes for patch 1.1.1. This is going to be releasing next Tuesday on August 8th. They are just releasing the patch notes early so that we know what to expect for the patch when it does go live next week. It's a class balance patch with some other changes to the game. It's focused a lot on sorcerers and barbarians, but there are actually changes and mostly buffs. I think it's actually entirely buffs, if I remember correctly reading through the patch notes today. For every class is getting some kind of buffs. Doesn't mean that your build specifically that you're running might be getting buffed, but every class is getting buffed in some fashion. But again, it is mostly focused on sorcerers and barbarians, and they do have kind of like a brief overview here at the top. So sorcerers are mainly getting some bonuses to damage reduction through aspects in the Paragon board, and they're also moving further away from what they call Kiss Curse effects, is what Blizzard calling these. So these are essentially some of the aspects and uniques for sorcerer that have a benefit but also a downside to them, and they're trying to move further away or even entirely remove that kind of gameplay item design going into the future. So they're trying to reduce that, which is good to see. Barbarians were given more fury generation on basic skills and increasing power on some unique items and aspects, as well as getting buffed. And they're trying to strengthen builds that aren't at a higher power level yet and diversify use cases for legendary items. So a lot of legendary aspects are, they've been changed, or they're going to be changed, to be more applicable to a wider variety of abilities and builds. A lot of the stuff they have already shown on the Campfire Chat live stream from Friday, but some of the numbers have been changed. I'm not going to read through every single line. I'm kind of just going to very briefly kind of go through the class changes, and then I'll go over the rest of the patch notes. So barbarians, like I mentioned, all your basic skills are going to be getting more theory generation. Double swing is getting a damage bonus. Some other skills are getting a damage bonus. Charge, specifically, I will mention, is getting numerous changes both in the vulnerable duration as well as the enhanced charge damage. Some of the aspects here for charge are also getting buffed as well. Ancestral charge down here. So charge is actually going to be a bit of a better skill to use, hopefully. There's also a bug fix later on that I'll re-mention again later. That will make charge a bit more usable. It's going to actually push everything with you instead of just scattering everything around. Hopefully that's what's going to be fixed. So all the key passive for Barbarian are being buffed except for Unbridled Rage. So Gushing Wounds for the bleed, that's being buffed. Unconstrained's buffed. Damage buff is going up. And Walking Arsenal is going to be 2 extra seconds. Damage increases for various aspects on Barbarian, as well as the ones relating to Earthquake damage reduction, and the bonus damage in Earthquake is going up. For uniques, Barbarian's Field of Crimson is getting damage increase, and Hellhammer is also getting a damage increase. They're also both getting bonus crit damage as a stat instead. This is actually going to happen for numerous uniques for almost every class, I believe, is getting stat changes for some of their unique items to be more desirable. Things like crit damage, vulnerable damage, cooldown reduction, movement speed. For example, the 100,000 steps is getting bonus movement speed. Robin Lottie is getting vulnerable damage. Cooldown reduction for the Battle Trance Amulet, stuff like that. I'm going to go to Sorcerer since they're one of the other kind of big classes getting a bunch of changes in this patch. So a lot of this stuff revolves around Fireball and Chain Lightning getting various damage increases to their various effects. Some passives are getting increased. So a lot of Sorcerer's defensiveness is going to be moved into the Paragon nodes and glyphs. For example, an extra 5% on this glyph for damage reduction. 13 to 25%, that's actually pretty big. I'm not even sure if this glyph is good or not, but the damage reductions are going up. Multiple rare nodes are going up, and yes, it is only 1%, which is not a lot, but these nodes can be picked up more than once on a Paragon board, because some of the rare nodes are scattered on a couple different boards, so you can actually get a couple of these depending on your Paragon board setup. So it's going to be up to a good amount of damage increase from all of this, as well as some other damage resistance increases from some aspects for the Sorcerer. So going back to the kind of Kiss Curse effect that they were talking about earlier, for example, the Serpentine aspect used to give an additional Hydra but reduce the duration, but now it's actually going to increase the duration. So they're totally flipping that around, and they're just going to making this a straight buff for people wanting to play Hydra. So again, they're trying to move further away from having downsides on sorcerer gear, which I like to see. More damage increases for these aspects here. Again, I would go to my other video where I talked about the dev campfire chat, or you can even just check the patch notes in for yourself and see all the changes. And there's kind of a lot to go over, so I don't want to go over everything, but I'm just gonna highlight the important stuff. There is going to be a new legendary aspect for sorcerers, the Mage Lord's aspect. You're going to be getting extra damage reduction when you do have the Veer's Mastery key passive. It will give you an extra 6 to 9% for each close enemy, up to 18 to 27%, which is nice to see. This was originally up to 90% in the preview they showed, which would have been insane. So they did dial that back a lot, by a lot, down to only 27%, but this is still good that they have another option for damage reduction for sorcerers. Again, more buffs, more increases across the board for various aspects on sorcerer. The Gloves of the Illuminator are also getting a bit of a buff as well. So this is where the fireball will bounce on the ground. The damage reduction penalty is still going to be there, but it's going to be reduced. So it used to be 65 to 55% reduced damage, but now it's 45 to 35% reduced damage. And they also improve the bouncing distance so that it's actually going to bounce a bit closer to the player. So that means it should be a lot easier for you to hit an enemy multiple times with the fireball bounce. So it should actually overall be a damage increase when you are using these gloves and you are using fireball. So hopefully this actually is enough to make these gloves at least decent. We'll see. Not sure. You're also getting a lucky hit chance to restore resource. All right, we'll scroll back up and we'll quickly go over Rogue. The rest of the classes didn't get a whole lot else, but they got some extra stuff. Some occasional things for Rogue here, for Caltrops and Poison Trap bonus damage. Siphoning Strikes for their healing lucky hit chances going up by an extra 10%. Nice to see. Windforce getting vulnerable damage, whereas Vakan getting cooldown reduction. Both much more desirable stats than what they had. Druids were getting extra spirit generation on our basic skills, and they're also buffing companions across the board. So wolves, ravens, the poison creeper is actually not being buffed, but the rabies is being buffed. So they're trying to improve companions and poison damage on druids. And necromancer is getting just a few minor changes. Hands, bone, spirit being buffed a little bit. Few aspects being buffed a little bit. The Greaves of the Empty Tomb are also getting movement speed similar to the 100,000 steps on the Barbarian. And these attacks will also deal less damage to minions now, and druid companions. So, good to see. Alright, that is the brief overview of the class changes. Next is going to be the rest of the patch notes. Again, a lot of this stuff they have already talked about from the campfire chat, but this is all listed in detail now here in the patch notes, so we'll go over them again. So they are going to be increasing the monster density in Nightmare Dungeons and Helltide, which is good to see. Most builds should be benefiting from extra enemies, and it should also be an XP increase, since most builds should be having some amount of AoE in their build already anyway, so this should just be good for everyone, I would imagine. Most builds should be benefiting from more enemies. Now, one thing they did talk about, and I'm not sure if it's good or bad yet, we'll have to see how it plays out, but they're going to be buffing boss health from level 60 and above, I guess. I would say maybe 61 and above, I guess, based on the wording on this. I'm assuming the scales for every level of the boss will increase its health. I don't think it only increases at level 80 or only increases at level 100. Because it just says bosses above level 60 will have more health. Level 35 and up enemies, or bosses I should say, will have a guaranteed chance to drop a legendary. This is for any boss, basically. So you'll see this in dungeon bosses, and even Legion event rewards will also be guaranteed legendaries starting at level 35. Treasure Goblins are going to be getting an increased drop chance for legendaries from level 6 to 14, and then from level 15 and onward, they will always drop a legendary item. It used to be 50%, but now it's going to be 100%. So yeah, thumbs up, good. They're going to be changing how barriers interact a little bit in the game. So on-hit effects should now actually properly apply to enemies that are currently have a barrier. For example, the exploit glyph did not actually apply vulnerable when you hit something with a barrier. The cost for skill and Paragon points is going to be going down, so it should be overall about 40% cheaper at level 100, so just respecking in general should be a lot cheaper to do. They have not changed the convenience of respecking, so for example, the Paragon board, you still have to respec one node at a time, which is still pretty annoying, but the cost of doing so should be a lot cheaper now. Elixir stack to 99, cool. Additional stash tab cannot be purchased with gold, good to see that. Hopefully they can keep making improvements to stash tab and stash space in general. And the leave dungeon cast time is now back to 3 seconds. It was up from 5 seconds. They mentioned that they did this because people were kind of using it to cheese hard dungeons, but they realized that this was kind of irrelevant, so they're going back to 3 seconds. Nightmare Sigils with the following affixes will not be spawning in anymore, so Resource Burn, Backstabbers, and Empowered Elites with Cold Enchanted, these will not show up on Nightmare Sigils anymore. Do keep in mind that Cold Enchanted Elites will still be able to spawn in your dungeons, it's just that the Empowered Elite affix from Nightmare Sigils will not be spawning anymore on Nightmare Sigils. They're buffing the Heart of Spellbreaking Malignant Heart for the Season 1 mechanic, so that's going to provide you a flat damage reduction when you take any elemental damage. Instead of it, I think it used to apply to that specific element damage reduction, but now it's just going to be a flat damage reduction overall. So good to see that. Temerity is getting a bit of a change, so it's going to be have more max life. The barrier itself is also going to scale on your max life, and it should actually work with stats that interact with barrier. It didn't before, so yeah, I'm glad that happened. There are a number of bug fixes as well. I can't speak today. A number of bug fixes as well from the patch. I'm not going to read over everything because there's a lot, but there are a few that I do want to bring up. One of them is going to be the dungeon reset button is now going to properly function now. I personally have had this happen a bunch where I will go to reset a dungeon and it will mention that a party member is currently in a dungeon and I can't reset dungeons. Even though I'm playing solo by myself, I'm not even in a party, but it would tell me I couldn't reset dungeons. This was super annoying. So I'm hoping this got fixed. There are some general class changes. Again, this is the charge bug fix, which didn't carry all enemies hit along with the barbarian. So I am hoping this will mean that enemies don't spread out as much and they can kind of travel with you when you charge. This is kind of one of the reasons I didn't like using charge, because it spread the enemies out too much. So I'm hoping this helps improve that. Some other minor tweaks and fixes to skills relating to druids and necromancers, where some things just weren't working properly. I do want to bring up that sorcerers are going to have a specific bug fix that should hopefully improve the Omnipower Malignant Heart. So it was inconsistently launching extra projectiles. So they said it was a bit misleading on how this worked, and basically it's supposed to consume as much mana as it could, depending on the affix on the actual heart power itself. So this should be a bit more clear on how this works and should be a lot more consistent for the amount of projectiles that it does fire. The general changes here are actually all pretty good. So there's going to be improvements to mounts on controller. So the spur skill, it's like the boost on the horse, should actually be in line with mouse and keyboard when you are using on controller. If you didn't know, controller players that tried to use their mounts were just slower compared to keyboard and mouse, so that's good to see. The Paragon rare nodes would sometimes not provide bonuses, even if you had enough stats, so that's nice that has been fixed. This one is going to be really interesting. So it says, fix an issue where continuously enchanting an item could result in having the same stat show repeatedly in subsequent rolls. I'm reading this to mean that you can't re-roll the stat that you're already rolling, so if you're trying to roll like crit damage, it's not going to roll crit damage again, I'm assuming. The wording on this could be interpreted a few different ways, though, so we're going to have to play around with the patch and see exactly what this means. It could mean that you can't roll that exact value of that stat. Let's say you have like 3% crit damage or crit chance, right? But you want to go to like 5% crit chance. Maybe you can't roll 3% crit chance again in the options, but it can still roll higher or lower on the crit chance value. I'm not really sure. Its wording is a bit up in the air, so we'll have to see kind of how this works when the patch goes live, or maybe Blizzard can elaborate or something like that. And there's also another fix for mounts on console, where it says your speed, or mounting your steed while moving would behave erratically when playing on console, so this should feel a little bit better to use. One of the devs on Twitter, I think it was Joe Shelley, did mention on Friday or Saturday that they were going to be letting your mount burst and like through barriers in the open world. I don't see that listed in the patch notes at all, so hopefully that does actually make it in sooner rather than later. That is something that they mentioned that they were going to be doing, so we'll see if that actually makes it into this patch or not. For monsters, I do want to bring up that the teleporter affix elites will no longer teleport to you from off screen and just like nuke you immediately. So if you're already playing a squishy build or you're playing sorcerer or something, you should hopefully die less to teleporter elite affix enemies. And then some other things relating to quests. There is one thing with the season pass, I believe it was part of the urn of bargaining. Yeah, here we go. So this is one of the seasonal season pass. What's it called? The word escapes me right now. The ashes that you can use to buff your XP or buff your sell price on items or whatever. The urn of bargaining was giving you increased sell price for items to vendors. This is actually increasing the enchantment cost for items accidentally, so this has been fixed so that the urn of bargaining should no longer mean that your enchanting cost should go up. So it's That's been fixed. Otherwise, just some other minor things relating to the shop and the battle pass and the UI. Miscellaneous stuff has been fixed. So, yep, that is your patch overview for patch 1.1.1. Brief thoughts at the end here. I think this is fine. I have no real issues with the patch. From what I read, there's no nerfs. Nothing's really broken. The only thing that can maybe be questionable is going to be the boss health, but I would say if you already had bad single target damage, I would say maybe your build should try and incorporate more single target damage. I know a lot of Whirlwind Barbs are kind of complaining about the boss health being increased, but also you sacrifice single target damage for playing Whirlwind. So, shrug. Not every build is going to be good at everything is my comment on that. So, I'm not saying you can't complain about that, but that's just my counterpoint. I don't think any of the changes here necessarily are like super critical for any class. I think a lot of the sorcerer ones actually are pretty interesting to read through, and some of them actually look pretty nice. Even as someone who doesn't play sorcerer, I actually am going to try playing sorcerer in season 1, I think, when I'm kind of done with my barbarian. But in terms of barbarian changes, it's good to see some of these things going up, but truth be told, I don't think this really is going to do a whole lot, but it's better than nothing. So I will take better than nothing. But nothing here really stands out to me. Even the Hellhammer I've been asked about, is this going to be good now? I mean, maybe, probably not. I'm not really sold on Hellhammer buffs. I mean, I'm glad it's there. It's more damage on the fire damage, more duration. It's going to last for an extra second. And the bonus crit damage does make it a lot more enticing. But I still question if that's actually what I want to be using for a build. Even though I'm using Upheaval, I still don't think that this is like really going to be enough. I will give it a fair chance. I'll give it a fair try. I'll comment on it when I do get a new Hellhammer. But I'm not sold on this being a good enough change. And Fields of Crimson, similar sense of Field of Crimson. I haven't run a Bleed Barb in a really long time, so I'm not too sure about this, but this kind of gives me the same vibe as Hellhammer. So we'll see. The bonus movement speed on 100,000 steps is nice to see as well, but at least for my Barbarian build that I've showcased on the channel, the 100,000 steps are they don't really fit the playstyle very well. The fact they have movement speed is a huge bonus, but the actual unique effect is really not that usable for my build. If you're running Ground Stomp, I think this is a good buff if you were wanting to try these out with Ground Stomp. There's other buffs to Earthquake as well, the damage reduction on Earthquake and the damage bonus in Earthquakes. You get the aspect where your Ground Stomps will summon an Earthquake. So there is some synergy there that maybe there's kind of something going on there, but I'm not like super sold. So, and the other classes I don't really play enough to really give too many thoughts on. I'm mainly a Barbarian player, so I mean, none of the Barbarian changes are really like holy shit, that's crazy. But again, better than nothing. So your mileage will vary depending on what kind of build you're running for how useful these things will be, but. For me, it's nothing too crazy. I mean, the extra 2 seconds on Walking Arsenal is nice, but am I like super crazy YouTuber thumbnail hype? Oh my god, craziest buff patch ever? Like, no, not really. But again, better than nothing, and I'm glad they're trying. So, yeah, I mean, I'm always a proponent of like trying it to see how it feels, to see how it plays. Is it really impactful enough? We'll find out. I mean, you can do the math on the early patch notes to see how useful you think something's going to be, but until we can really start playing it, I don't feel like I'm going to have too much to say until I can really get a feel for how all this comes together. Yeah, I guess final thoughts and some extra stuff. I'm glad Nightmare Dungeon and Helltide is getting more monster density. The Nightmare Dungeon especially, I think it's going to feel way better with the amount of extra enemies that are going to spawn, so I'm definitely looking forward to that. The extra boss HP, kind of like I mentioned, we'll see how it feels. I'm not too concerned about it personally. I'm already doing a lot of single target damage with Death Blow, buff Death Blow on my Barbarian, but if your build already struggles single target, then this is definitely going to feel pretty bad. So you might need to do some build adjustments or even a build swap entirely if this is too much of a problem for you. Sometimes the answer is you have to try a different build or try different skills in your build to compensate for any deficiencies. So do keep that in mind, that just because your build is good for AoE doesn't mean it's good for single target, and that's kind of intentional, so do keep that in mind. Legendary, guaranteed legendary is good. I mean, just an easy, free kind of W there. Barriers being improved across the board is nice to see, even though I don't really use barriers, but I'm glad that it exists. The extra stash tab is super nice. This Malignant Heart is actually possibly kind of actually enticing now, but 20% it's still not like a huge amount of damage reduction. I mean, it's nice, but it's not like a ton. These resources, or these affixes being gone is good. It just means I'm salvaging less sigils though, so hopefully I don't run out of sigil dust even faster now, but I probably will. And then bug fixes, so yeah, I mean, that's about it. So, yeah, I think it's gonna be a good patch overall. It's nothing game-breaking or game-changing, I should say, but they are steps in the right direction. I think if you're playing Sorcerer, I think a lot of these things are probably gonna be pretty enticing, at least for me. Even as a non-Sorcerer player, this makes me want to play Sorcerer. I think my desire to play Sorcerer has definitely gone up a lot. Seeing changes to buffs to change lightning, even fireball. So yeah, glad to see Sorcerer's definitely getting some attention. I'm sure there's going to be more stuff that can be improved upon in the future, but that's why we get more patches, and that's why we're providing more feedback to Blizzard. So yeah, overall, I'm pretty happy with what I'm reading. It's not, nothing super crazy, but I think it is a good step in the right direction for most classes here and some other gameplay stuff. So thumbs up for me. I'm looking forward to the patch. And yeah, all right, that's all I got. So thank you all for watching. I will see you all in the next video. Take care.